On an old city street in Blackwater, Pennsylvania, one that once had another name, daylight made it seem ordinary enough, but after dark, people avoided it. They hurried past it, and in time, they stopped speaking of it as if it were just another street. Something about that place unsettled people, as if it had a mind of its own, as if it were haunted, or as if something unclean roamed there after dark. Strange encounters were whispered about. Disappearances were tied to it. Warnings spread. And before long, the street was known for something far darker than anyone could explain. It was in the autumn of 1891 that two brothers, Elias and Martin Vell, stood facing the dark, empty street. Elias, the older at 10 years old, knew the stories. He had heard the warnings about Willow Drive and knew it was not a street people trusted after dark. Men lowered their voices when its name came up. Dogs were said to bark at the mouth of the road, digging their paws into the ground, refusing to go any farther, while their owners cursed and pulled at the leash. Horses grew skittish too, snorting, rolling their eyes, and tossing their heads as if they sensed something in the dark that people could not see. Worst of all, Elias had heard that some who went down that road at night never came back. But he also knew the trouble he and Martin would be in if they did not take the shortcut. He and his 8-year-old brother had spent too long returning from errands for their mother. A toy shop window had held them there longer than it should have, bright little treasures calling to boys too young to think much about time. Now evening had sunk low over Blackwater, and the light was almost gone. The longer way home would be safer, but it would also make them later, much later. They knew their mother would be angry, and at that moment that felt worse than facing a scary road. So Elias tightened his grip on Martin's hand and stepped forward. He told himself it was only a road. Willow Drive had first been laid out as a carriage drive, broader than the neighboring streets and curved to follow the shape of the land beneath a canopy of old trees. In daylight, it appeared beautiful with low-hanging tree branches filling in all about it. But after dark, Willow Drive became a place people hurried past. Unlike the busier roads closer to the center of town, it was poorly lit. A lamp stood at one end, another near the far side. Between them stretched a dim, winding run of road where branches leaned low overhead, and the gloom seemed heavier than it should have been. People said it felt wrong there at night, too quiet, too still, as if the road itself changed after sunset. At first, the stories had been easy enough to dismiss. A man claimed he heard footsteps behind him and found no one there. A woman swore she saw someone standing beneath the trees, only for the figure to vanish when she looked again. One woman later wrote in her journal about walking the street alone at night and feeling something there she could not explain. In her own words, she said,
"The darkness itself seemed aware of me, a terrible emptiness, despair, and horror. It seemed as if unseen hands were reaching from the dark to draw me in and keep me there."
After that, the reports became harder to ignore. People were seen entering Willow Drive after dark and never coming out the other side. Warnings were issued. Residents were urged not to use the street at night. Lanterns were hung along the road in hopes of driving back fear. But the flames would not stay burning. One after another, they sputtered, dimmed, and died, as if the dark itself rejected the light. That only deepened the dread, and soon the townsfolk had begun calling it something else. Hollow Drive, the street of the missing. Elias did not see what the fuss was about at first as he and Martin made their way down the street. It looked like any other road under a bright moonlit sky. Their shoes scraped the ground. Dead leaves stirred at the edges. Behind them, the lamp at the mouth of the street still glowed faintly, and for a few moments, Elias felt foolish for being afraid. But it was not long before he realized something was wrong. The farther they walked, the heavier the night seemed to become. The air grew still. The sounds of the city faded until there was nothing left but their own footsteps and Martin's uneasy breathing. The darkness ahead no longer looked like ordinary darkness. It seemed thicker than before, as if it were gathering itself around them. "Let's turn back," Martin said, his voice already beginning to shake. "I'm scared." "It'll be all right," Elias said, though his own voice lacked the confidence he wanted it to have. "We're almost at the end, I think." But the road did not end. Soon the darkness surrounded them like a heavy blanket pulled tight, close, suffocating, and wrong. The branches overhead seemed lower now, and the blackness on either side of the road felt crowded, as though something stood just beyond sight. Shadows seemed to shift and lean, though Elias could not tell whether they were truly moving or whether fear was beginning to play tricks on his eyes. Martin began to cry harder. Elias began to realize they were in trouble. When the boys failed to return home, their mother raised the alarm before midnight. Neighbors took lanterns and searched the surrounding streets. Police followed soon after. Men searched the road from end to end, checked the storage buildings, the alleyways feeding into it, the empty ground along the sides, even the rooftops and drainage ditches. They found nothing. No torn clothing, no sign of a struggle, no footprints that could be clearly followed. It was as if the street had taken the boys and left nothing behind. By morning, the disappearance of Elias and Martin Vale had spread across Blackwater. Before the week was out, their faces were in the papers. Witnesses came forward. More stories surfaced. Other disappearances, once treated as isolated mysteries, were pulled back into public view and laid beside this one. Willow Drive ceased to be merely a road people disliked after dark. It became something worse, a place people spoke of with lowered voices, uneasy eyes, and the feeling that even saying too much about it might draw its attention. Years passed, and with them the names of other missing souls were added to the street's dark reputation. In time, the disappearance of the Vale boys finally forced the city officials to do what the people of Blackwater had already done for years. They abandoned the old name and made the warning official. They renamed the street Hollow Drive. All the while, to the two brothers, they were only lost, wandering in darkness, never knowing the world beyond Hollow Drive had gone on without them. They wandered in the black as it closed around them from every side, so complete and smothering that it no longer felt like night, but like something alive pressing in. Elias held tight to Martin's hand, trying to sound brave for his younger brother, while his own heart pounded so hard it hurt. Then a black cat shot across the road in front of them and stopped, its back arced and its eyes fixed on the darkness behind the boys. It hissed sharply, as if warning them to turn back, then vanished into the black. "Just keep holding my hand," Elias said. "I just want to go home," Martin cried. "I don't care if Mother will be mad." Then Elias felt a tug that was not his brother's. It came suddenly, sharp and hard, yanking at his arm from the darkness beside the road. "What's that?" "What's what?" Martin asked, his voice breaking. "Something's pulling me. Help me." Martin screamed. Fear locked him in place. He could do nothing but cling and cry as Elias's hand began to slide from his grasp, dragged by something neither boy could see. The darkness around them seemed to stir at once. Voices rose out of it, whispers at first, then something worse. They began calling the boys names from every side, slipping through the black and settling into their minds like cold fingers. Elias. Martin. "Leave us alone," Elias shouted into the dark. And just as suddenly as it had begun, the pulling stopped. Far ahead, a small red glow appeared. It was faint at first, no bigger than an ember seen through smoke, but it moved slowly toward them through the darkness. "Help!" Elias cried. "What's that light?" Martin asked. "I'm not sure," Elias said, his voice trembling, "but at least it's a light." "Help!" they both cried. They clung to each other as the glow drew nearer, swaying back and forth in the darkness, and as it came, the whispering began to fade. The pressure of the dark loosened. The unseen things that had crowded close seemed to draw back from the road. Then the light reached them. The boys saw that it came from a lantern held in the hand of a tall old man standing behind it. The reddish glow lit only part of him, leaving the rest hidden in the shadow. But even so, they felt at once that he was not like whatever had been moving around them in the dark. "What are you two doing here?" the old man asked. "Help us," Martin sobbed. "We're lost. We just want to go home." The old man studied them for a long moment. "I see," he said. "Do you know where you are?" The boys shook their heads. "You should not be here," the old man said. "Where are we?" Martin asked. "And who are you?" The old man looked into the darkness beyond them before answering. "This is a place where things cross that were never meant to cross," he said. "A tear between worlds. Souls lose their way here. Darkness gathers here. I have stood watch over it for a long time, keeping it bound to this one place. But I am old, and my strength is weakening. If you two found your way here, then I have already completely failed to protect where you're from." "How do we go home?" Elias asked. His voice shook now, and he no longer cared how frightened he sounded. "I just want to go home." "I can send you back," the old man said. but it will not be as it was. My time here is ending. I cannot hold this place much longer." He lifted the lantern between them, its reddish glow trembling across their frightened faces. "You must take this lantern and leave it where you entered. If it is hung there and kept burning, this place will remain closed, and no one else will be taken into it. But if the light goes out and is not kept, the darkness bound here will spread, and it will take more souls than it should." Martin looked at Elias through his tears. "If it gets us home," he said, "we'll do it." The old man placed the lantern into Martin's shaking hands. "Remember what I said," he told him. "Hang it where you entered. Keep it lit." Martin swallowed hard and nodded. "I will," he said. On a cold November night in 1911, the impossible stepped out of Hollow Drive. Several people standing near the street later swore they saw a light far down in the darkness, where no light should have been. At first it was no more than a faint, wavering ember, small enough to be mistaken for tired eyes or a trick of the night. But it did not vanish. It grew steadier, brighter, and slowly, terribly slowly, it began moving toward them through the black stretch of road. As it drew near, those watching saw that the light came from an old lantern giving off a strange reddish glow. And behind that light walked 2 boys. When they finally stepped clear of the darkness, the people nearest the mouth of Hollow Drive went silent. They were children. One looked to be about 10, the other about 8. Their clothes were years out of date. Their faces were pale with confusion, and their eyes moved over the street with growing alarm, as if the world around them had shifted into something they did not recognize. They looked not like boys returning home, but like boys who had wandered out of some place they were never meant to survive. The people who found them did not know who they were. The boys stared at the street beyond Hollow Drive as if seeing a stranger's city. The buildings stood taller than they remembered. The road looked different. Even the air of the place seemed wrong to them. When asked their names, they answered simply that they were Elias and Martin Vale, and that they were only trying to get home. They were taken at once to the authorities. At first, the officers assumed it had to be some mistake, some cruel confusion. But when the old case files were pulled and the names checked, astonishment spread through the room like a chill. There they were, the Vale boys, missing since the autumn of 1891, their disappearance written plainly in the city's own hand. The descriptions matched, the ages matched, even the smallest details lined up too neatly to dismiss. No one could explain it. The boy's mother was contacted. When she arrived and saw them, she fainted where she stood. And when she was revived, Elias looked at her with open bewilderment and said, "That's not our mother. Our mother isn't that old." The room went still. An officer beside him crouched down and answered in a voice barely above a whisper, "Son, you have been missing for 20 years. That is your mother. Where have you boys been?" Elias and Martin tried to tell them. They said they had only been gone a few hours. They spoke of the darkness, of the voices, of the old man who had appeared with the lantern, and of the warning he had given them before sending them back. Their story spread quickly through Blackwater, and unbelievable though it was, no one laughed it away. The lantern was hung near Hollow Drive, and from that day on, it was kept lit. The fear of the street did not disappear. People still said the darkness there felt different after sunset. Some claimed they heard strange sounds farther down the road when the night was deep enough. Others swore the shadows moved in ways shadows should not move. But the disappearances stopped. And over time, the old lantern became more than a safeguard. It became a boundary, a quiet defiance against whatever had once taken hold there. A sign that the darkness, though never gone, could be kept at bay by a single, faithful light. People began stopping there, at first out of curiosity, then out of reverence, then because they needed to. Before long, people were gathering beneath the old lantern to tell stories too strange to explain, too disturbing to forget, and too easily dismissed anywhere else. And there, on Hollow Drive, they told them. Not because the lantern answered every question, but because it had become a place where the unbelievable could be spoken without mockery, a place where fear, grief, and the unexplained were met with listening instead of laughter, a place where what haunted a person could be drawn out of silence and held, for a little while, in the light. That became the meaning of the lantern. It was not there to deny the darkness. It was there to face it, to stand at the edge of it, to burn where something terrible once waited unchallenged. And that is why we gather there still. We gather beneath the old lantern on Hollow Drive because some stories are too strange to bury, too heavy to carry alone, and too important to leave in the dark. Some are warnings, some are grief, some are mysteries. Some are the last echoes of things that happened long ago and still have not loosened their hold. But all of them deserve to be told. That is what the lantern means. That is why it still burns. That is why we return to Hollow Drive, to listen, to remember, to sit for a while at the edge of the dark and speak aloud the things that would otherwise follow us in silence, to bring strange stories into the light. Thank you for joining us beneath the glow of the old lantern on Hollow Drive. I'm Andy, and I hope you enjoyed this original story. If this tale pulled you in, unsettled you, or kept you wondering what might be waiting just beyond the light, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you thought. Share this episode with someone who enjoys strange, eerie, original stories, and don't forget to explore our other episodes while you're here. There are always more shadows waiting on Hollow Drive, and more stories still to be brought into the light. Until next time, keep the lantern lit.